have nothing to lose because everything that I thought I could never lose, I'm already losing and I still have to live. So I have nothing to lose. So therefore, I'm going for it.
The more we latch on to an identity, the more suffering we create for ourselves.
This idea of me having control really created so much anxiety.
Welcome to The Authentic Path. I'm your host, Dr. Vanessa Calderon, Harvard-trained physician and healer. I integrate science and ancestral wisdom to support you in creating the success you desire in all areas of your life. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hello, friends. Welcome. I have my very, very, very dear friend here today. And I feel like it's such a treat to bring you such a special guest. She's a dear friend of mine that I have known since medical school. She's written an incredible book. For those of you who are watching us on YouTube, we're going to link the book in the show notes. It's called Keep Your Head Up. And this is Dr. Tasha Faruqui. So I'm going to have her come on to introduce herself. And we are going to have a really fantastic conversation that I hope will support anyone who's dealing with complexities of uncertainty in life.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. I'm Dr. Tasha Faruqui. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. I am a pediatrician, mother to 3 children, one who's medically complex and currently in hospice, and recently also an author of Keep Your Head Up. And that just got published September of 2025, and here to share my story and connect with all of you.
So are you okay starting from the beginning, Tasha?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how you had planned your life to go and what happened along the way.
I really felt very prepared for life because I knew exactly what I wanted and had everything planned out. So from a young age of 6, I knew that I wanted to go to medical school, and I had planned out the years that it would take to get there. I had planned out the decade and the time frame that I wanted to get married. I also knew for sure that I wanted to be a mother. So this is literally how I pursued my life up through college. And even in college, I was determined to get to med school at any cost, including multiple attempts at the MCAT with great training and practice sessions. And once I got my acceptance into med school, I felt pretty complete, like I had made it and that life was just going to be easier after that. And then going through med school, my next biggest hurdle was really then finding my now husband, who was also in medicine. And I thought that was going to be so complicated in trying to figure out how we would be in the same city and be able to work through our commitments, myself with National Service Corps, him with the Navy. And when we were placed in the same place after our training, then I also thought that we were set.
And then what happened?
And then I was humbled by life, like maybe some of your listeners, in that my second daughter, it was evident to me at birth that something was not quite right. What that was, I wasn't sure. In that moment, I had a new desire to not only figure out what was wrong, but also to figure out how to fix it. And soon my life started to turn, and I was still very resistant to having it turn. And in that period of time, became very focused of being on this diagnostic odyssey of what does my daughter Soraya have. She presented with feeding difficulties and then ultimately ended up having failure to thrive, along with global developmental delay, along with aspiration. And the number of differentials for what she could have were pretty numerous and pretty serious. Once we realized, one, that whatever it was likely could not be fixed or go away, then it was the realization that we may actually not even have an answer, as most of the most severe things that we were looking for, those tests ended up coming back negative. And so then our life took a different course, which was to kind of throw it off course. And it was kind of restarting on what matters to us. And is that medical care for our daughter? Is it family support, or is it our careers? Still trying to kind of fit all the pieces in this algorithm of priorities that we still valued. And with that, life continued to turn in that we scrapped one life of being these two physicians having these lovely children that are healthy, because that's honestly how I imagined my life to go, is with healthy children. I hadn't imagined anything different. And then realizing that I would have a child with medical complexity, once we felt safe in the sense that she's not going to die, because we had all of these tests that came back negative, we started rebuilding another life, another dream. And while we were grieving our first path, we were starting to build this story, this path of Soraya leading a very long life, and with us being a part of it and us focusing on who would take care of her after we died. And come to find out, there were more twists along the way as Soraya was gaining skills really from age 3 to 9. And prior to 3 was all of the testing. She was able to walk. She was able to talk. She had a G tube, or a feeding tube, to help her gain weight. She was learning skills. She was going to school. And then at age 9, everything changed. She became very fatigued. She had a hard time breathing. We ended up doing we've had multiple before, sleep study, but this time it showed she was hypoventilating. And essentially that was a sign that this disease process, or unknown disease process, had a neuromuscular component, or where there was muscle weakness. But that was also our inkling to see that it was progressive, that this was not only a new symptom, but these symptoms are becoming more evident, and she's getting more and more fatigued. And back in 2021, this required her the need to have a BiPAP ventilator, first just at night, and then progressively more. And soon we made the decision to bring on palliative care onto our team. And not much after we were into palliative care, we were placed on hospice. I'm grateful to say that we were placed in hospice 4 years ago. And at that time, she had a prognosis of 18 months to 2 years. And while she is with us, we are still in a place of uncertainty, and she is still declining. And it has made us throw out every path and every plan that we had ever made.
I just want to highlight this for all of you that are listening, that Tasha is not just a mother of 3 beautiful children. She's also a pediatrician. So and her husband's also a physician. So I imagine having to navigate the complexity of your child having an illness like this as a doctor, not having answers, must have created a lot of other emotions that some people might not even experience. Do you mind sharing about that?
Yes, I think that just having an identity that includes being a physician comes with this idea that because my husband and I are privileged enough to have an education that includes medicine, that we should, I quote, should be able to figure this out. I think in the first 3 to 5 years of her life, and honestly, still present now, but more to a less of an extent, is this pressure to figure it out. Like, if there's anybody in the world that could have a child that is undiagnosed, that could figure it out, it should be us. And I think that pressure, kept us motivated for a long time, but then also had us feeling very defeated when we couldn't find it, and feeling very defeated at the time of us realizing that we couldn't save her. And even in the midst of this fog, we ended up finding her gene deletion just like 6 months ago. And the irony of that is her gene deletion is so rare. There are only 50 cases worldwide, and hers is the most severe, as her deletion is the largest, and she's the only person that is not a candidate for gene therapy. And I say that with a smile, in the sense of the surprises and the twists don't stop. Things are still coming up that we are still processing at all times.
If you're open to sharing about this too, as you were navigating all of this, you were also diagnosed with something.
Yes. I call it irony of life, but here we had been looking for a gene culprit for my daughter. And in the midst, I knew that I had a strong family history of breast and ovarian cancer. And I think from, previous decades, the only gene that I knew of that could do that is BRCA. And my sister, myself, and my mom had been tested for BRCA, and we were negative. And so also had this sense of assurance that knowing that my family has a history, that we didn't actually carry a genetic risk. More recently, as genetics has vastly changed, at a routine annual gyne appointment, I was offered to take additional gene testing just based on my family history. And I took it really kind of not expecting anything, because in my mind, with all the gene testing we've done, I knew that I didn't have BRCA. And so much to my surprise, I came back with a gene called PALB2, which I had never heard of. And it carries a risk of breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and pancreatic cancer. And its rates of breast cancer are second to just BRCA. And so still with having a lifetime risk of like 60 to 70% of having breast cancer, and triple to 5 times the risk of pancreatic cancer and ovarian cancer than the general population. And so that happened about 2 years ago, prior to us finding Soraya's gene. But having this information and living our life really allowed me to make some decisions that, I may or may not have made had we not had the life that was in front of us.
Yeah, because you went through pretty comprehensive treatment for breast cancer. I want to just shift the conversation because for those of you that don't know Dr. Faruqui, you can follow her on Instagram, the Faruqui 5, I think, right? We'll also link
Yes.
that in the show notes. But the reason why I invite you all to do that is because we're sharing the story of something that can feel pretty heavy, pretty heavy. And the way you and your family have chosen to approach this or experience it is such a testament to your spirit. So I knew Tasha when we were medical students. We both volunteered for a pretty active organization that was pretty grassroots activisty organization called the American Medical Student Association. And Tasha and I have stayed connected throughout. Tasha was one of my first coaching clients actually a long time ago. And so I know her personally from a long time ago. I actually was there the weekend that she met her husband now. I remember when you shared with us how excited you were about him. And I just think it's really incredibly beautiful how you all have chosen to approach this. Even the fact that you've chosen to write this book. Maybe we can just shift a little bit and you can share with us how you two just generally decided to experience this and how you decided to experience life and then your motivation behind writing the book.
And so in thinking about the motivation to write the book, but also how we kind of chose to live this life, I will say that it was not that smooth. I think that my husband and I I know we chose differently. And I think that I want to normalize that in these situations, you can love each other and be living the same experience, but processing in completely different ways. Honestly, for the first 10 years of Soraya's life, we both did a pretty decent job of compartmentalizing and having this be our private life and kept it very separate from our professional life. And there are these, sayings, even amongst colleagues of, well, you have your doctor hat now and you have your mom hat now, quite literally, I was trying to do that, where I was trying to separate these two parts of me. And when it came to writing a book, it really came from a place of having everything taken away from you. I would love to tell you that we sat down and we talked about how beautiful it would be if we shared this story and this is like what we want to do. But in reality, it got to a point where I felt, and I knew my husband felt this too, the part that kept us in line and what we were feeling together was loneliness and isolation. Not from each other, but from the rest of the world. We felt like we were going through this tornado that nobody else could see and nobody else could understand. There was this idea that maybe there was one other person that was either experiencing something similar or feeling something like this, even if it wasn't the same situation. And at that point, I told my husband, I said, I really want to share. I really want to write a book. And there's a whole nother story on like what steps there was to get to that point. And, coaching was step one, therapy, meditation. There were a lot of things. It wasn't like it just came to me. There was work in the background that got me to a point where I felt this nudge / aggressive push to share in some capacity. I didn't know if it was going to be social media. I didn't know if it was going to be a book, but I was adamant with my husband that I'm going to do this. And he was hesitant and reluctant. I mean, he was like, I will do whatever you want to support this. I've never seen you so sure about something. I'm not sure how it's going to impact me, our family, but I am here to support you and we'll figure it out. And so that led me to write the book. And as each chapter came, I had him and my oldest daughter review it. And many chapters were really hard for both of them to digest, but I needed their blessing before it went to print. And whether they were happy about parts and not happy about parts, I did have their blessing. And I don't think any of us knew the impact of the book, not only for others, but honestly for ourselves, that as I was writing and as I was sharing, there was a change in my husband, there was a change in my children, in just the innate power of sharing a story and the power of connecting, and how something so hard could also bring about beautiful connections and things that we had never thought could happen with this first step of writing and sharing.
Yeah, I think we forget how healing just sharing a story can be. It's why grief circles and healing circles have existed for generations and generations before us. And if you think about indigenous medicine, that is how healing would happen. People would come together and share in circle and let themselves be held. We've become so isolated, I think, in this current world that we're living in, where vulnerability looks like so much weakness. And what I picked up on when I've known your story for a long time, but when I started watching you share it out loud publicly, is just a combination of the level of courage, but also surrender that it takes to share. Courage to share something so vulnerable, so tender, because you don't know how the world will receive it. And then also surrender, like, okay, even though it feels hard, I'm going to do it anyway. Because, and you had something driving you. I'd love to dive deeper into, wow, isn't that an interesting energy that you had, Tasha? Kind of being like, hey, it's time for you to share the story. And you're sharing it not just from this incredibly experience, like you're a mother of 3, not just as a mother, but as a pediatrician. You probably know because of what you've been hearing from people that have read your book, but that's pretty incredible to hear the story from both the mother and the pediatrician.
And again, you said, and I think for so long I had it so separate. So I felt, you talk about the fear and, the perception that you're weak. There was this inner fear that I had been carrying that if I share this, it will be a reflection of weakness, not only as a mother, but as a pediatrician. How will other people trust me with their children if they know that I have a child that I cannot save? Where this fear came from, probably deep rooted, but something that I'd never heard it from anybody. It's something that is tied from within. And that had to be changed or challenged. And the first step was the surrender. And I actually got that surrender from coaching with you. That was my first step of being challenged to just think differently. Like, what if you can't save her? What if? Like, what would that look like? And I had to really come terms with surrendering before, for me at least, before I could feel safe sharing. And it wasn't even that I felt safe. It was still scary and I did it anyways, but it's the realization that I have nothing to lose because everything that I thought I could never lose, I'm already losing and I still have to live. So I have nothing to lose. So therefore I'm going for it. And so all of those different aspects came together, and also realizing that I was never two separate identities. I was never a physician and only a physician, and I was never only a mother and not a physician. They were always all there. It's like saying to me, pretend like you're not a female and pretend like you're doing this as a man. Pretend like you have white skin and do it like that. And you can't separate parts of you that are just innately intertwined. And that was the other part of I was always all one. And I can't separate it anymore. I will never be just a mom without medical knowledge, and I can never be a doctor without the experience of me feeling what it's like as a mother, for better, for worse, for judgment or not. Like it's silly for me to try to separate any further.
It's so fascinating how you bring in the concept of identity because I think the more we latch on to an identity, the more suffering we create for ourselves because then we become attached to something, and attachment, as Buddhism says, is the root of all suffering. And it's hard to release that because who am I without that? And then the same is true is if I can only be this in this setting, like if I can only be a doctor and I cannot be a mom here because being a mom would be weak, I have to be very professional in the setting. But I can't be a doctor here because if I'm a doctor taking care when I'm in the hospital with my daughter, like, and everything that I know, and when you allow yourself, it's not even a merging of identities, it's a releasing of identities and just allowing yourself to be in all that you are, in your beautiful, wise, glorious essence, That's really, I feel like the journey that I have watched you go on has been a journey of completion, of like coming home to this beautiful, authentic version of yourself that is all of these parts without having to be any of the parts specifically.
And not even realizing that all of these parts of my life were building blocks for what is. And what is still always evolving. And I think that's the other misconception that I had, that at some point you land and you are complete and you've done it. And by it is like you have succeeded in your job, in your happiness, and you are now just coasting in life. And this perception is so not reality. And the release is also being open to being guided in places that you may have never seen because you're so closed off and you have such tunnel vision into what you think you should be doing from who you thought you were from, many years ago or even a year ago. I just think that in allowing yourself to release and be open, you're allowing yourself to evolve and accept what is.
That is some wise, wise, wise words. So you've navigated a lot and you are navigating a lot. As they say, there's no misstep, right? Every step we take serves us in some way, lends itself to some experiences that we use to grow. And so there's never a misstep for all of those that think that you took a big U-turn somewhere, or you're experiencing something hard, or why you, there's going to be something that you get to grow from always. All those experiences are kind of like buds, rose buds that grow into this beautiful rose bush. So when you think about, you look back, let's say as an early young mom, even before you were a mom, how do you think like, what lessons would you share with that version of you before you became a mom? And then maybe as you were having children and you were realizing there's so much uncertainty, what are some lessons? What are some things you wish you knew then?
Release control. I think this idea of me having control really created so much stress, anxiety that wasn't necessary. I was trying to conform my child, trying to conform what I thought my job should look like, trying to get everything to fit into this idea that never really needed to be in the first place. So that would be one. I think the other thing I really wish, and this is, again, I think that everything is a lesson, but I never realized how much that inner voice of how we were parented comes out when you parent. And I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't prepared for this idea of imagine what type of parent you would want to be. Because in my mind, I just assumed that I would parent the way that I had been parented and that would work out. And I never challenged that. And as I go through parenthood and as I have such different circumstances than my own mother had, that I realize that there are lessons on how I want to do things differently. And I wish that I knew that even earlier, even though there's no missteps, in that we all can strive to be the parents that we wish we had, even if it wasn't received by you as a child, that you can do that. And that in itself can be healing for yourself. And that has been a whole nother journey in parenthood.
Okay, hold on. We're going to talk about both of those. The control one I remember, but the second one, what you just said, if I could have been the parent to myself that I wish I had, is that what you just said?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. I just want to break that down because one of the things you said is, I just assumed I would parent the way I was parented. And I think most of us walk around life without questioning anything that we're ever doing. We just do things reflexively. We don't realize we're doing it based on programming, how we were programmed, essentially, what we read, what we saw on TV. And a lot of it is out of alignment with who we are at our core. And it creates a lot of incoherence. And that's where suffering comes in, pain, people pleasing, lack of boundaries, all those types of things. And and it has to boil up to a point of like, whoa, like frustration, grief, resentment. Something has to happen for you to change. And when we do change, we never offer ourselves that level of grace or compassion. Like maybe what you could have said, which was like, I wish I would have parented my kids differently, but I parented myself the way I wish I needed to be parented. Tell us more about that. How did you do that? Or give us an example of what that meant for you.
Oh, well, in thinking about a child crying, when they're an infant, innately, we're trying to stop the crying. And I think that makes sense when you're an infant. Either the baby is hungry, they need to be held, their diaper needs to be changed. That was flowing for me. However, when they're a toddler or a young child and they're expressing themselves, and my programming is make it stop, do whatever it takes to distract, avoid, stop. That doesn't work. That doesn't work for me and what I was feeling on the inside. That instead, I would let my child, and not even let, but encourage them to feel and for them to feel safe. And that even if they did something wrong, that I would be there to hug them because they already knew that they did something wrong, that they didn't need any further punishing. And that is what I felt on the inside. But then you almost challenge, is that bad parenting? And what is good parenting? What is bad parenting? And this doesn't feel right. And so instead I would think about, pretend like you're that child and you were just sobbing because you can't go out and be with your friends, or you can't eat that other piece of chocolate cake. Like, what does that feel like? And what would you need? And that's like what would guide me to what's next and how to respond. And it just felt so much better. And it doesn't mean that my way is better, but it felt better for me. And again, based on culture, beliefs, there's so many reasons that people parent how they parent. And I think that the privilege that I have in being in pediatrics, and I can see so many different ways that parents connect, that I at least had the opportunity to see that there's more than one way to do this. And that's what felt best for me, that is kind of what I have been leading with, even though it's unconventional. And so is my life.
I love that you said your compass or your barometer for whether or not it made sense is if it felt right for you. Wow. I think that that's really, really huge. It takes a new level of self-trust to lean in to say, this feels right to me, and I can trust that that must be the right way to do it if it feels right. And I want to just invite everyone listening to know that that's available to you, that level of trust, that your emotions, your feelings can be a compass for you. And I know, Tasha, it was a journey for you to get to a place where you can be with your feelings without chasing them away, and then be with them and trust yourself enough to know. And I just want to honor you for that, because look at the world has opened up for you. It's surrender. It's like a new level of flow.
It's definitely a new level of flow, and it's still flowing.
I have so many more questions to ask you. We haven't even talked about your book, really. And I know we're coming to time. So for those listening, we're going to have a part 2. Don't worry. We have a lot to learn from Dr. Faruqui still. But before we sign off, Tasha, anything specific you want to share about the book? I didn't ask you ahead of time, but if there's anything you want to read us in the book, you can. Man, there's so much goodness here. So if you're looking at the art, if you're watching this on YouTube, called Keep Your Head Up by Dr. Tasha Faruqui, you can find it anywhere you get books. I have teared up every time I've looked at the book, and every time I open it up, I get emotional because I know I know your journey, and I know what's gone into writing this, and I know who you are as a person, and I know your heart and your soul has been poured into these pages, and not just yours, but the story, like Soraya's life, and so Safi's life and your daughter, like everybody's, and so I just, I really honor you for bringing this into the hands of so many people, because I'm sure you have so many testimonials of mothers and other family members whose hearts you've touched, because of your courage to share.
I think the biggest surprise is having such a unique story. I did not realize could have such a universal impact on how the feelings are similar, even though the stories can be completely different. And, as far as what I want to share is along the journey, there are universal takeaways that I think that anyone living life can relate to. And I think for that, I'm hoping it will offer everybody something.
Mm, I think that that's right. I think that's 100% right. Well, Tasha, it's been so, 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 so wonderful to have you here. I think you were on my very first podcast on the Empowered Brain way back many years ago. And now you're here as an author. It's like, wow, to watch the arc of the journey is incredible. I love you so much, sweet friend. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thank you for having me. I can't wait for part two.
Absolutely. I can't wait, girlfriend.